Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 77, a walking tour of the Borghese Museum. Today, Sheri and I are going to take you on a walk through this fabulous museum. Now, originally, we came here so that I could take some pictures of Pauline Bonaparte, Napoleon's sister, who is immortalized in this magnificent carving by Canova. But the museum is full of incredible art. Now, there's a real trick to this museum, however. They only allow a certain number of people to come in every 2 hours. So you have 2 hours to view the museum. Now, it's the 2 stories, and there's a basement, and then there's the ground floor, and then the first floor. We're going to go through and show you how we managed to cover this relatively easy in 2 hours. But it is a little tricky. So let's start our walk. Well, the reservations for the museum was the first slot that opens. I believe it's 9 o'clock in the morning. We left our apartment, went down here to the metro by the Coliseum, went up to the metro here at the train station. We then switched metro trains and headed to the Bernini exit, where we began our walk to the Borghese Palace. And then we simply walked up the various streets through this ad sign and entered into the Borghese Park, right through here. So we came in right here to Porta Pinciana, which is actually where the old Roman wall is located, and then still quite a bit of it, as you'll see. And then we enter in, and then we go down this path right here via the Museum de Borghese, and we go to the other museum. Now, this whole area that you see here is actually the original villa. This was put together by Scipione Caffarelli Borghese. This is Pope Paul V's nephew, megalomaniac nephew. He had the villa built in 1613 to 1616, and there were the vineyards of the family just outside where we entered through that port from the wall. This whole section was divided into 3 parts. There was a garden that had avenues and fountains and tombstones and architectural fragments, and they led to what is called the casino, which is the lake, which has a whole series of Roman buildings. And it also had ancient statues in front of it. There was also a secret garden on either side of it. Then there was a section of gardens of antiquities planted with 600 damask oaks, and also ancient statues of seated figures and various other statues that lined its avenues. And the final section, there was a great big park, which is the zoo today up here. And at the time it was created, it had animal enclosures. So it has been a zoo for quite some time. So that's the whole part of this. And you go, well, how in the world did this become a public park? Well, unfortunately, the Borghese families had financial problems and tax problems at the end of the 1800s and had to sell it off to the government for, I think it was 3 million lira at the time. And that included the whole grounds, the building, and the artwork that was in it. And I'll talk about that when we get to the artwork. And then here we have an aerial view of the Borghese Palace today. One of the things about it that Sheri and I noticed is that although it is full of art, you still got the feeling of what it was like when it was lived in. Of course, there's more art crowded into it in the later 1800s than it was in the 1600s. It really flowed well. So let's start our walk up to the museum. Well, as we leave the metro station and start walking up the street, we realize pretty quickly that this is the embassy section of Rome, and here is the United States Embassy that we walk by. There's also a lot of high-dollar shopping. So here is Sheri as a mannequin in front of one of the couture places. And then we come up to what's left of the Roman wall in this section of the city. This is the area known as the Porta Pinciana. And so here it is the actual Porta. And yes, they do drive their cars through these all the time. This set of walls was built by Marcus Aurelius to protect the city. And then here we are a little bit further away, and you can see the main fortification in front of the various gates. Then when you go through there, you just cross the street, and here is the gigantic garden. And we never had enough time to go back and see all the other stuff because they have the Modern Art Museum, the zoo, there are a lot of other things to see there, and there's also supposed to be a really good view towards the Vatican. So we just walked through this forest of gigantic trees, and then we began to see the Borghese Palace as we're coming towards it. And this is the area we're going to be going into to go down to the basement to get our tickets, but we're there early. We're always there early. That's a good thing. You do not want to be late. So we walked around to the front of the building. And there you see the beautiful... This was renovated in the middle 1800s to the form that you see today and on the interior. Each of the rooms was themed on various types of art. And then they have this beautiful fountain in front, which we were looking at. While we were looking at it, the gentleman was jogging with his Labrador Retriever, who evidently they go by here every day because when they got to the fountain, the dog just flew into the center of it, swam to the other side, picked up his human, and headed off. And so here's a close-up view of one of the fountains. Well, we walk back around the building, then we go down to the left-hand side of the stairs into the basement. And here is a chart of the Borghese Gallery. So we're down here in the basement, which is where your tickets are. They also have a permanent collection, and then they have temporary collections. They got the bookstore, they have the art store, and they have a cafeteria. And then there is the ground floor up above us, and then the first floor up above that. So down here in the basement, you can see the ticket area. Today, if you go to the Museum of the Borgheses, the fee starts at $25 and goes up. You can actually be with a group of 15 people with your own guide. That's the most expensive ticket, but there are different variations. You will find that in many of the museums. You don't want to go to Rome and then say, well, what are we going to do while we're here? If you want to see these places, you need to find out when to get the tickets. It's better to go early, to get your tickets earlier than at the last minute. This was not part of the Rome Pass. There's a Roma Pass, which allows you to get into a lot of different places. So check around. But anyway, it's quite a bit of money for 2 hours. That's $25 per person. So we wandered around here for a little bit, checking everything out. What we wanted to see was really on the ground floor, but I also had a Titian, and that's up on the first floor. So what we decided to do was to start at the top and work our way down. Well, they have an elevator, but that elevator is not going to hold everybody. So we decided to walk up the stairs. It was just faster. We simply walked up the multiple flights of stairs to get to the top and then walked back down. It was faster. It saved us time. You know, when you say you have 2 hours in this museum, it's like, well, is that going to be enough? So we took off. So here we are with our map of the first floor. And you see the staircase right here, which is where we came up. Now, it would be really nice if Sheri and I had this on our hands and could wander around in order of the rooms, okay? But you notice that the staircase is here by room 16, and there's 11. So what we ended up doing, because of the time, we went together most of the time, and we just went from room to room taking pictures of items that we were particularly interested in. Which is great if you're not trying to retrace what was going on in the museum, such as I'm doing right now. So it has taken a while to put this together, because I've had the pictures of all of the art, and I could separate it pretty quickly out on what floor it was located based on a guidebook that I had bought. But we didn't take pictures of all of the ceilings in each of the rooms. Sheri had some that she liked, and I had some that I liked. And fortunately, in most cases, that was almost all of the rooms. However, we did not have, as far as this floor, we did not take a picture of room 9, 11, 12, and 13. And some of them were very, very, very small. You can see 13, 11, 12. They're pretty small. But most of the others have relatively large ones. And I was unable to find some of those, or they were controlled by Alamy and several other of the companies that have these things copyrighted. So I'm going to go room by room, room 10, 14, show you the art that's in it, some of actually the most important piece of art, and then we'll go down to the next floor. But that's what happens when you have 2 hours for a whole building like this, and you're not exactly sure what you're going to find. I mean, we found the whole room of Caravaggio's. It was like a mini Louvre. Here's where we started. We come out of our little staircase area right here into this little room number 11 along in here, which we didn't find anything of real interest to us. That doesn't mean there wasn't spectacular art in it, but we didn't take any pictures there. So we will head down to room number 10. Now in room 10, which was originally referred to as the room of sleep because it had a 4-poster bed in it and all sorts of things associated with sleep, it's now the room of Hercules. And what you see on the wall are 2 paintings. They're both Venuses. The one on the left is Venus and Cupid with honeycomb, and the other one is Venus with 2 Cupids. Now the 2 Cupids one is done between 1520 and 1525 by Bresciano. This close-up view of his Venus with the Cupid and the honeycomb, that was done by Cranach in 1531. Then after leaving room 10, we went through other rooms, but we didn't take any pictures. So in room 14, which is known as the Lanfranc room, this room was painted by the artist Lanfranc, and he did the magnificent ceiling, which is known as the Council of the Gods. And that was done in 1624. And the one painting that we took a picture of when we were in that, which is Peter Freed from Prison, done in 1630 by Valentine. Then we head on into room number 15, which is known as the Room of Aurora. You have Aurora in the middle, Dawn on the left, and Vesper on the right. That was painted by Courbet in 1782. In this room, you have this beautiful painting of the Last Supper, done by Bassano in 1546 and 47. Now, room 16 is known as the Room of Flora, and has this beautiful circular painting of Flora. Unfortunately, neither Sheri or I took a picture of it, and I haven't been unable to find it in the internet anywhere, even by Alamy. But there are two paintings in here that are very, very important. The first one is this beautiful Resurrection of Christ by Pino from 1569 to 1579. And the other one, which is a little different, is Cleopatra. Now that's done by Conti in the 1550s. It shows the snake biting her on her breast. Now room 18 is dedicated to Jupiter and Calliope. In the middle, the painting by Gognereau, 1787, is Jupiter dressed as a satyr approaching Calliope. And the painting that we liked in here was The Disposition of Christ by Rubens, done in 1602. Moving from there, we headed to room number 19, the Room of Paris and Helen. And in the ceiling is a painting by Hamilton called The Death of Paris, the Trojan War. In it, you have this painting known as Normandino and Lucinia, discovered by the Ogre. That is done by Lanfranc, the man who did one of the ceilings back before. It was done in 1624. And then we head to the main event. That is room number 20, called the Room of Psyche. Now originally it had been the Room of the Centaur. This was done by Norvelli in 1781. And what you find in here, just looking in the room as people are wandering around, see this bronze statue, but you see what's back behind it on the wall. That's a Titian, this Sacred and Profane Love. So we go over here to look at the bronze, get a nice view of it from two different angles. This is a bronze portrait of a youth. And then we see the spectacular painting of Titian, Sacred and Profane Love, which was done in 1514. Titian was 25 years old when he painted this, and it celebrates the marriage of a Venetian, Niccolo Aurelio, coat of arms are on that sarcophagus, and Laura Bagnarotti. The bride is dressed in white, sitting beside Cupid, and is assisted by Venus in person. The figure with the vase of jewels symbolizes fleeting happiness on earth, and the one bearing the burning flame, naked, Venus, is God's love that symbolizes eternal happiness in heaven. Now, it is referred to as sacred and profane love as a result of interpretation of the painting in the 1700s, which was more of a moralistic reading on the nude figure. So the people who looked at it at the 1700s made the reference that sacred love is the one with clothes and profane love is the one with just naked. But the interesting part about this, you remember when at the beginning I talked about how the poor Borghese family had gone in the debt and were forced to sell their properties and the building and its art collection to the Italian government for, I said 3 million liras. It's actually 3.6 million liras. But they were offered 4 million liras by the Rothschild family in 1899 just for the Titian. But the family decided no, they wouldn't do that. They made a deal with the government and they would stick with it. So it has been here ever since. And then in between, you can go out the doors here to the terrace and look out into the wonderful villa where the garden and the rest of the park is located. And now it's time to head down one level to the ground floor. Well, here's our map of the ground floor. And you can see some of the objects that we're going to be seeing, particularly the Bernini Rape of Persephone by Pluto. And of course, what I really came to see, which was Pauline Borghese, done by Canova. And there's one right here in the corner, which is kind of interesting. In room 4, there's a marble copy of what is known Hermaphroditus. The ancient Hermaphroditus is formed partially from portrayals of Venus and other female nudes, and partly from contemporaneous feminized Hellenistic portrayals of Dionysius and Bacchus. There are actually 3 copies of this. The original was in bronze, and it was done by by two sculptors named Pollicles, about 155 BC. The bronze was mentioned in Pliny's Natural History. Well, the Romans made lots of copies in stone of famous Greek bronzes, which is fortunate. Well, anyway, they were doing some excavations in 1608 near the baths of Diocletian, and they discovered this statue, the sleeping Hermaphroditus. And, of course, the Borghese cardinal took care of picking it up. Now, the funny thing about it is you see it in this picture laying on this bed. There was no bed with the original. The bed that she is laying on was actually purchased. Cardinal Borghese had Gian Lorenzo Bernini do a bed for her, a buttoned mattress. Now, the one that the Borgheses have now, that was a second one, which was found in 1781, and it took the place of the one that was in the Borghese Gallery. Then you have a third one discovered in 1880, and it's in another museum in Rome. What happened to the first one? Well, when Napoleon's sister Pauline married Count Borghese in 1807, Napoleon, I assume the Borgheses were in financial trouble at that time too, Napoleon bought a great deal of their collection. They had the largest privately held collection of Renaissance masters. And Napoleon bought sculptures and paintings, and they all went to the Louvre. They stayed in the Louvre for a while, but when Napoleon was overthrown, then that which had not been paid, some of it was actually sent back. There's another statue that was also important called the Gladiator. Here's a picture of the Gladiator. It was also dispensed the same way. Here we are moving into room number 4. Now this is known as the gallery or the room of the emperors. And the center piece of the ceiling is known as the Triumph of Galatia, done by Angelus from 1778 to 1780. And then here is a look at the kind of floor that you find throughout the Borghese Museum. And of course, in the center, you have the spectacular Pluto with Persephone by Bernini. This was done from 1621 to 22. And here's every angle that you can look at. It's one of the nice things about museums where these art pieces are out, where you can get to see the whole area around them. It is just absolutely gorgeous to see this work. Now we enter room number 6, which is known as the Room of the Gladiator. The painting that you see in the center is the Council of the Gods about the Trojan War. That was painted by Pecmux in 1777 to 1778. And then the main sculptor in here is another Bernini. This is Aeneas and Anchises. This was done from 1618 to 1620. And again, we get to go all the way around to see all the different angles. And then this was a little interesting carving. This is known as the Sleeping Putti, or the Sleeping Cupids. It was done in 1609, but it's unknown. And then we have another Bernini here, which is known as Truth, done from 1645 to 52. Here we are entering room number 7, the Egyptian room. And the central painting is known as the Sphinx at Giza, which was done by Conca in 1779 to 80. And then in the room, we have this black marble Isis, which was from 150 AD. And then we have the center room carving, which is a satyr riding a dolphin. That is from the 1st century AD, although the head was added in the 1500s, so we would have had the whole body but no head. And then there were 2 outstanding mosaics on the floor. One of them appears to be like Medusa, and the other one is one of the other gods. The next room that we enter in is known as the Room of Silenus, and on the ceiling you have the Sacrifice of Silenus, done by Conca in 1775 through 1778. But I like to call it the Caravaggio room because it's full of Caravaggios. Here, of course, we see the famous David with the head of Goliath, done by Caravaggio, 1609-1610. The self-portrait of Caravaggio as Bacchus, done in 1583. And then the very young St. John the Baptist by Caravaggio in 1609 to 1610. And this portrait of St. Jerome, done by Caravaggio in 1605 to 1606. And then you walk out into the next room, which is known as the entrance hall. And the ceiling is unbelievable. It is Jupiter in the center with the history of Rome around it, with Romulus and Remus and all sorts of other people. This was done by Rossi in 1775 to 1776. And the thing that is really special about this room is on the floor. And that is the magnificent mosaics of the gladiators. You'll see all sorts of different gladiators. Here you see a a venator, someone who is fighting animals. Here's one who's fighting a lion. Then you see the different classification, succators and other people in here. There's a rhetorist in this one, and you see the people being killed. And then here's another one with the heaviest, the Murmillos and the Sammonites. I must have taken something like 50 pictures of this because I used part of it in one of my classes on gladiating. Now we come into the room of the vase. Well, it's really called Pauline Bonaparte's room now, the room of Pauline, because the vase that used to be in here is in the Louvre at this point. Now, this picture shows one of the things I was mentioning at the very beginning of the show, and that is the buildings, most of the light is natural. And we got into this section and the sun has not provided us with much lighting. I do notice that the museum has a listing of all the most popular times, and 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon are usually the favorites. But at any rate, we were able to compensate for it. So here's Pauline reclining, Pauline Bonaparte, and it's done by Canova. That was done in 1803 to 1808. And when it was unveiled, her mother unveiled this, Madame Mère. She didn't know it was going to be nude, and she fainted after she pulled the cover off. But she's on this nice chaise lounge. It looks very, very soft. Here's a nice view of it from another angle. And here we are from the foot looking towards her. And of course we must have the back view as well to see this classic Roman reclining on a bed or a chaise look. It's just beautiful, absolutely stunning. And then once we left Pauline, we went into the room of Apollo and Daphne. And here you see on the ceiling Apollo and Daphne. And that is done by Angeletti from 1780 to 1785. Here we have the Bernini sculpture of Apollo and Daphne. That was done 1622 to 1625. And then we have the sunroom, and inside the sunroom we have Bernini's David, a little different version of David. He is winding up, ready to strike. And then as we leave the building, we go down this little hall to exit, and we see this. Now initially, I could have sworn that was Christ. You take a picture of it and get the really close where the hand's coming out for you. It appears like judgment is upon you. However, this is done by Houdon, and it is St. John the Baptist, and he's in the act of baptizing you. So technically speaking, if you put your head underneath his hand, he is going to baptize you. It is really a stunning work of art in its location. A little scary too. At any rate, after we said goodbye to St. John and Pauline and all the other cast of characters and beautiful artwork, it was time to leave. And so we walk out, and there is the walls of Rome, and we're going to continue on our walk through Rome. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to head to Diocletian's baths. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.